I did it. Okay. And then, okay, so we are starting today with Kapitel Kufyud test 119. Mostly, my method of doing things is by avoiding the long ones. So I always avoided all the long Rashis and all the long commentaries on Chumash. If it was too long, just left it. And I see that there are lots of people like me. Like if there's a long Rashi, the girls at school say, "We're not doing this long one, are we?" And traditionally, that's how I've been. So it was never ever thought in my head to do Kapitel Kufyu test 119, much too long. And actually, on the aeroplane, I had this thought like, why is it a problem to do a long capital? We'd rather just do it over a few weeks and do it. So that's how it came to be. What I've also figured out is that the long Rashis, just as a by the way, are much easier than the short ones. Because in the long Rashis, Rashi explains himself, and in the short ones, he's so cryptic that you can't really understand it. So that's just a side note about the long things. So Kufya Test, as we said, it's the longest parak of Tehillim in the whole book of Tehillim. It has 176 verses. It is referred to as the most holy chapter of Tehillim. In some places, it's called the alphabet Tehillim, and that is because, as you'll notice, each like chapter, so to speak, of this thing goes with the letters of the alphabet. So we first have 8 lines that start with an aleph, then we have 8 lines that start with a beis, and so it goes. 8 time. So understanding why it's called the alphabet and why David HaMelech chose to write this capital in alphabet is because this chapter is about perfecting oneself, finding a way to connect with Hashem in an orderly fashion. So there's all different ways that we connect with Hashem. Sometimes it's a moment of inspiration. Sometimes it's something that happens. Sometimes we have been working on some aspect of ourselves. Sometimes we're learning a sefer that inspires us or motivates us. Sometimes we go to a shir that motivates us or inspires us. But we are all trying in our lives to motivate ourselves to be better people, to connect with Hashem. Here, David HaMelech is speaking about doing this process in an orderly fashion. Start with Aleph and go on to Beis and then to Gimel, and in an orderly way find out how to connect with Hashem. I think in English we use the expression from A to Z, which is the similar kind of idea, which means going from a beginning and working nicely onwards. Why David HaMelech specifically chose the number 8, like 8 alephs, 8 bases, 8 gimels, is 8 is the number above nature. It's a number of spirituality. 7 is the number of nature. Hashem created the world in 7 days, and 8 is above that. So even when you're working in an orderly fashion to connect with Hashem, you can be working as orderly as you like, but you need to go above nature. In other words, there are times where we need to push ourselves, go into places that are a little bit less natural for us, do something that we maybe think like I don't need to be doing, but push ourselves past the normal, past the ordinary. Just as an interesting point, there are 8,888 psukim in the Torah. So with a similar idea of the number of 8. Also, just before we look at the capital itself, you probably all know, and so I just remind you that this is the chapter of Tehillim that's used specifically when we are davening for someone who is sick, or at a memorial for someone. So if we're davening for someone who's sick, we take the letters of their name and we say the parts of this Tehillim that match with the letters of their name. So if the person is Shmerel, then we would do all the shins, all the mems, right? So we get the name Shmerel. We then also do the letters of Bain, the son of, or Bat, the daughter of, and their mother's name. When we are davening for someone who is sick, we also do the letters of Kra Satan, Kuf Resh Ayin and Satan, which means tear away the Satan, take away the accuser who is making that person sick. And if we do this at a memorial service, then at the end of it, depending on custom, we say the letters Neshama, for their soul, or we say the letters of Matseva, which is their monument stone. The Chida says that we should say this chapter of Tehillim every week. So people have different customs, either to say the whole chapter at once, sometimes during the week. Most common custom is to say it in the late afternoon on Shabbos, or to divide it up and say it over the week. And the Chida says if you say this chapter of Tehillim every week, you'll be protected from all harm. Originally, for those people who would get up at midnight and do Tikkun Chatzos, this was a part of Tikkun Chatzos. This was a part of what was said in the in the midnight prayers. So David says in other places, David writes that this prayer is the loftiest, the highest of all of Tehillim, and we know that Tehillim is very high, very lofty, and this is the highest of all. Each of the 8 lines, which are for each letter, has a different or slightly different theme. And the first theme, okay, so today what we want to do is the Aleph. And the theme that David HaMelech is going with here is pure faith, unquestioning faith. So we go through the different ways that we connect with Hashem, but the most basic way of connecting with Hashem is what we call emunah pshuta, just pure faith. We don't ask questions. We don't try and understand. We just have pure faith, and that's what David HaMelech is speaking about in these 8 psukim. So we're going to start looking inside, and it begins the very first of the Aleph psukim begins Ashrei Mimei Darech. Fortunate are the ones whose way is simple. Ha'holchim b'seres Hashem, and they go with the teachings of Hashem. So, if you remember, the very beginning of Tehillim also starts like this, but goes off on a different tangent. So Perek Aleph, if you're holding a Tehillim in your hand and you want to go back and look, it begins, Ashrei ha'ish, fortunate is the man, Asher lo halach be'atzas Hashem, who doesn't go in the way of the wicked, etc., but he goes only in a... he doesn't sit among the mockers. And over here, David HaMelech says, fortunate is the person who goes b'tzeres Hashem in the way of Hashem. So first of all, we want to understand what is the difference between that first pasuk and this pasuk. So in Yiddishkeit, we have 2 parts to Yiddishkeit. We have the things we may not do, and we have the things that we must do, right? The things that you can't do, and the things that you must do. Now, let's say you are trying to develop a relationship with somebody. So you meet someone. The first thing you want to make sure is that you don't annoy them, right? You don't want to do the things that they don't like. So you're not their friend, but you're going to be careful, like not to sit on top of them, not to bring something that's bad smelling in the room. You're going to be doing whatever you need to do not to annoy them, to give a nice, decent impression. That's how Tehillim begins. Fortunate is the person who doesn't go with the wicked and the mockers and whatever. In other words, still in our relationship with Hashem, just being careful not to annoy Hashem. And then we come to 119 and says, okay, it's not enough. You want to call someone your friend, you can't just not annoy them. You actually have to start doing nice things, right? You have to start developing a relationship with them, and that's capital Kuf Yutes. Ashrei Tzimimei Derech, fortunate are those, Haholchim b'soros Hashem, who are going in the way of Hashem, who are keeping Hashem's Torah, who are building a relationship with Hashem. What does it mean to Mimei Derech? Whose way is simple, whose thing. So we want to understand this concept of tamim, of perfect. We look back in the Torah and we see what is the Torah. When the Torah refers to someone as tamim, as perfection, what is the Torah talking about? So there's a few times in the Torah where it mentions this. We have Avraham after his bris. Now he's perfect, because up until his bris, there was still one thing that he wasn't doing, that he didn't have a bris. And once he had a bris, now he's perfect. He's a tamim. He's whole. Noach, it calls Noach ish tamim, a perfect man. So what does that mean? Noach is living in a time where it's bad all around him, and he's trying his best to come close to Hashem and do everything Hashem wants. He's called he's a tamim. He's called perfect. So this concept of tamim is the desire, the yearning, as we'll see in the next few psukim, to be perfect, to do what Hashem wants, what Hashem wants us to do. And the Mepharshim say that rather than say perfect, which is a little translation, we should be saying sincere. Someone who is wholehearted, sincere, wants to do what Hashem wants from us. The Baal Shem Tov often referred to people as simple Jews. And he didn't mean stupid, he didn't mean whatever. These Jews, their service of Hashem, largely because they were uneducated, was simplicity. They just simply wanted to connect with Hashem. They weren't always sure how. They didn't have all the big opportunities. They just were simple Jews, Tamim. This concept of being this simple Jew means that we're taking simple emunah, just simple plain emunah, and following Hashem. So one of the other places in the Torah that we find this concept of tamim is in Devarim. There's a whole lot of things that are written that we're not allowed to do. So we're not allowed to follow witchcraft, and we're not allowed to look for fortune tellers and all those kind of things. And simply there, the Torah says, tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. You must be tamim, you must be sincere, you must be perfect with Hashem your God. So if we look at that in context, Rashi explains to us, you don't have to go looking for answers. There's so many times we don't know answers. You don't have to go looking for future, like what the fortune teller is going to tell you. You don't have to know what's going to be in the future. You don't even have to understand everything that's happening in your life or in your world around you. We often want to, but says Hashem, or Moshe actually says it in the Torah, tamim tiyeh. Just be innocent with Hashem. Don't trust in Hashem. Don't go looking in other places to try and find answers. Have faith. Simple faith. That's called tamim. And that's the first thing that we are aspiring, that we are trying to do. I heard such a story of a man who heard the Rebbe speaking for the first time. And afterwards, when he was giving a review of listening to the Rebbe, he said, the Rebbe is such an interesting opposites. When the Rebbe speaks Torah, he's speaking of the highest levels, from all different svarim, all different levels of intellect, different, like Gemara and then Medrash and then Kabbalah. He's speaking of all those different levels. But when he's speaking about Hashem, he speaks with the faith, and these are the words of this particular man. He said he speaks with the faith of a simple bobber. I was busy trying to decide if I'm a simple bobber. In other words, a simple bobber is somebody who just believes in Hashem, doesn't have big reasons, doesn't always understand, just believes in Hashem. The Frierdiker Rebbe pointed out to us, that you look at somebody like David HaMelech, king of Israel. He was the biggest Talmud Chacham you could imagine. he was presented with the most difficult of questions. He sat and answered shilas and world questions, and people from other countries brought him questions. But when we think of David HaMelech, what do we accredit him for straight away? Is the book of Tehillim. That book of Tehillim, where anybody, whoever you are, can pick it up and say Tehillim. The simplest person can achieve great things with Tehillim, and that's what we credit David HaMelech with. So we know there is place, and we have to, as we'll see as we go through this, and we do have to study and try understand and learn various things. But the first step, the aleph, is Tamimei derech, just have simple faith. Believe in Hashem. Don't go looking in other places. And this is what David HaMelech is telling us in the very first pasuk over here. Ashrei, you are fortunate, Tamimei derech, if you just have simple faith. Ha'holchim b'seres Hashem, that will help you walk in the ways of Hashem. And over here, the Radak comments on that, and he says, we all think that we need to be so learned in order to be a Torah Jew, someone who's keeping Torah. And says the Radak, no. First comes faith, and then you are considered. Just the simple faith considers you a full Jew, a full functioning Jew. So we always have both things that we need in our lives: the studying, but not letting the studying take away from our simple faith. And then he continues and he says, Ashrei noitzrei edosav, happy or fortunate are those who keep his mitzvahs, b'chol lev, with their whole heart, yidrashuhu, they seek him. So again, David HaMelech is giving us an important lesson. Most of us try to connect with Hashem, some stage or other. We are trying, we are working on some level of connecting with Hashem. And David HaMelech says, how do you have to do it? B'chol lev. You've got to do this with your whole heart. Whatever a person does half-heartedly never comes out perfect. A person has to put themselves into Yiddishkeit wholeheartedly. You have to try and have faith in Hashem wholeheartedly. B'chol lev, says David HaMelech, you must seek him. And then you will find yourself, Yidrashu, then you will find yourself Ashrei, fortunate. And that's the emphasis on it. And all the commentaries start asking, what does it mean? How can you put yourself wholeheartedly into Torah and mitzvahs? And he says, talk about them. We have to keep on talking about Torah and mitzvahs, and we're going to see this theme carry on in the next few psukim, or in the next pasuk specifically. This idea that when we put ourselves into something completely, wholeheartedly, we start making it something usual in our lives, something normal in our lives. So just taking notice that the first pasuk says, how do you connect to Hashem? And it leads you b'Torah Hashem, to studying the Torah of Hashem. And this pasuk, we're speaking about Edosav, keeping his mitzvahs, and obviously the two are very connected, but David HaMelech is using both of them. And then he moves to pasuk Gimel. In pasuk Gimel, he says, Af lo fa'alu avlo, they do no wrong, bidrachav halachu, they walk in Hashem's ways. So it seems, at face value, that what David HaMelech is saying over here is, you've been doing all this good, full-hearted, wholehearted keeping of Torah and mitzvahs, and says, and also you don't do wrong. Okay, what you can't do. So it's not good enough for us just not to do bad. Okay, so that's what we touched on a bit right at the beginning. If you don't go doing anything, you'll never do anything wrong. So if you want to keep Shabbos properly, get into bed on Friday afternoon and get out on Saturday night, right? You won't do anything wrong. You'll have kept this perfect Shabbos where you didn't do anything wrong. And yet Chazal tell us that that's not called keeping Shabbos, right? Because there's so much more than just not doing anything wrong. And the same thing, I think there's a famous saying that the ship that never leaves the harbor doesn't sink. Doesn't always work like that in Cape Town. Sometimes the ships in the harbor sink, but it has a much less chance of sinking. It's much safer if it's not out in the big sea. So we might think that in order to be a good Jew, in order to have a connection with Hashem, all I have to do is be careful that I don't do anything wrong. David Melech says no. You want to have a real connection with Hashem, first go do things. Okay, you have to go out into the world. You have to try and connect. You have to try and connect to Hashem at a studying level, a Torah study level. You have to try and connect to Hashem with a mitzvahs level, and also not do anything wrong. Obviously, he continues and says, "Ata tzivisa pikudecha." You gave us these instructions, lishmar ma'od, for us to keep. And so it seems like so strange. You gave us these instructions, Hashem. Like, what does it mean? You gave us these instructions. Why is David suddenly now telling Hashem? And the Metzudas David says simply something that we all know. When we do things for someone else, that's a show of love. So I always say this with cooking tongue. Whenever I cook tongue, it's pure love, okay? Because I can't stand tongue, okay? And I'm not going to eat it. And they say, why do I cook it? Because my husband loves it, okay? So when you do something, when I cook tongue, it's love for my husband. It's not for myself. There are many times where I'm doing things for both of us, right? So cook something that we both like. That's love for him and love for me. And David HaMelech is saying something interesting here. He says, when it comes to Torah, there are times where there are things that we don't necessarily like so much. We're not something that we really, really want to be doing now. And why am I doing it? Atot tzivisa. You, Hashem, told me to. And because you, Hashem, want me to do it, that's why I'm doing it. Not because it makes me feel good, and not because I love this. That's great if that happens also. But the biggest thing is that I keep Torah mitzvahs because Hashem wants me to do it. And that's what connects me. Connects me to Hashem. David HaMelech says, interestingly, here, Achala yikainu d'rachai. I pray, okay, he stops suddenly and says, I pray that my way, that my derech is directed, lishmor chukecha, to keep your mitzvahs. So it's, first of all, it's a strange prayer, but I'm praying to you, Hashem, that you direct me in the right way. But also this word, achalai. Achalai, which I've just translated as pray, and I actually looked up in a few different English translations how they translate the word achalai, and it's more than just pray. Achalai is yearn. I really, really want. And what is it that I really, really want? I want to connect with you, Hashem. I want to walk in your way. I want to keep Torah. I want to keep mitzvahs. But truth is that for most of us, we have that desire, but we also have life. And sometimes life gets in the way of that desire. So yes, Hashem, I want to do your Torah and mitzvahs, but I also want to live my life. Like, I want to carry on doing what I want to do. And therefore the request to Hashem, achalai. I am telling you, Hashem, that I really, in my heart of hearts, I really, really want to be connected to you. When I'm not connected to you, it's not because I don't want to. I really want to. It's that life got in the way. And this is what we ask of Hashem, help me. Achala, yikainu drachai, help me that my way should be directed, so that it's easier for me to keep your ways, your Torah and your mitzvahs. And he says, "Az lo evosh, then I won't be embarrassed. V'habiti es kol mitzvaysecha, when I see all your mitzvahs." So Hashem, I don't want to be embarrassed about the fact that I don't keep all of your mitzvahs. If you, Hashem, know that I really, really want it, and you can see that my soul yearning is to be right, is to be connected, is to be motivated, then I don't need to be embarrassed. I know that you understand that I'm trying my best, and that's obviously if we are trying our best, and I get it or I don't. That's a simple level. A slightly deeper level than that. It's interesting that this pasuk is the pasuk that the Rambam uses for starting off his Mishnah Torah. And what is that about? Why does he use it? The Mishnah Torah is the lists and lists of every single mitzvah of the Torah. So you know that there is such a rule that every single person is supposed to do all 613 mitzvahs. But practically, it's not possible, right? Some of us are females, some of us are males, some of us are kohanim, some of us are not. How is it possible for somebody to do all of Hashem's mitzvahs? And the Rambam explains to us that achalai, we have to yearn to do the mitzvahs. And what does that mean? Study them. The studying of mitzvahs, all mitzvahs, Hashem considers it as though we actually did them if we study them. So the most famous of that is the custom to learn the laws of building the Beis HaMikdash during the 3 weeks. And what is that? I can't suddenly start building a Beis HaMikdash in my garden. Okay, it's not going to happen. So how do I show you, Hashem, that I really want there to be a Beis HaMikdash? I learn how to do it. I learn all the intricate details of how to build a Beis HaMikdash and all the different things. And that should show you, Hashem, how much I want to be connected. I want to be able to do your mitzvahs. I remember one year that I saw online that there's a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael for kohanim, so that they should be ready and knowing and able to do. To work in the Beis HaMikdash, if it comes today, there'll be kohanim who will be ready to serve there. And that particular year, so they were collecting lambs that would be kosher for Korban Pesach. And my first thought was to laugh, and my second thought was like, you don't laugh, Rivki Chaikin. They are the ones who are going to have lambs for Korban Pesach should Mashiach come today. And this is achalai. Really yearning to be keeping all of the mitzvahs. Interesting ending to this pasuk where it says, "Bahabiti el kol mitzvaysecha." When I see all of your commandments, and the commentaries tell us that this is talking specifically about tzitzis. Every time a person looks at their tzitzis, it's supposed to remind them of every single mitzvah of Torah. And you've probably come across that before, that if you add up the number of the strings and the knots and whatever, you come to 613. I saw a further explanation of what Bahabiti El Kumitz itself, that I look to all your mitzvahs. So it says that when a person asks a rabbi or shaila, what's his reaction when the rabbi stands up and takes out a sefer and starts looking up? So you could have the one reaction, which is, what? He's been a rabbi for so long and he doesn't know that answer yet. Like, what is going on? And David HaMelech says, no matter how long you've learned, go and look up the answer again. Go and check it out again. So if the person who you ask any questions to goes and checks, looks up something, then you should be impressed, not unimpressed. You should be impressed with the fact that they're going to look up and that they are learning before they answer you. And where does that source come from? Bahabiti, when I look up, it's kol mitzvaysecha, to all your mitzvahs. Also, the first word of this pasuk, the word az, then. So if we all stop for a second and think where we know that word az. So we say in our morning davening, az yashir, right? Quoting the story of Moshe Rabbeinu singing after the splitting of the sea. And it says, then he sang, and lots of commentaries will explain to us Why the future tense in the word az yashir, then he will sing, is talking about Mashiach time. This is, Mashiach is not mentioned outright in the Torah. We have a lot of hints, and this is one of the hints to Mashiach time. Az yashir, then we will sing. And say the commentaries over here, if we work very hard during Galus time, as lay Avash, then when Mashiach comes, we will not be embarrassed. Because Mashiach will say, I know you wanted Mashiach. I know you tried to bring Mashiach. I know you were working on it. You don't have to be embarrassed about it at all. And continues, Pasuk Zayin, Eidcha b'yesha levav. I thank you with my full heart. Belamdi mishpatei tzidkecha, when I study your laws. And just for time's sake, I'm going to hurry with this a little bit. What is David HaMelech thanking Hashem for? He says, how does a person study and then have reason to thank Hashem? And Chazal point out from this pasuk that the more we learn, the happier we become with the Torah learning. So when we first start learning, we might have a whole lot of stuff that we don't understand, and we might have a whole lot of stuff that we don't like, and we might have a whole lot of stuff that we don't agree with. But the more you learn, the more practical it becomes, the more explanations you get, the more it makes sense. And so he says, if you've yearned for it and studied it over and over again, then we'll be able to thank Hashem. We'll be able to be happy, to see the sense in Torah and mitzvahs. And when we see the sense in Torah and mitzvahs, then we're happy. Then we can feel happy. And the last pasuk of this group says, "Es chukecha eshmor, I will keep your chukim, your statutes. Al ta'azveni ad ma'od, never forsake me, Hashem, forever." So chukecha are those mitzvahs that we don't understand. So we've been speaking about pure faith in these eight psukim. So at this point, when I've worked this hard, I'll be okay, and I'll be okay even if there are challenges, even if there are chukim, even if there are things that I don't really understand. But there's one proviso, and that is Hashem, you stand at my side. Al tazveni. If a person feels Hashem is near them, if a person feels that Hashem is standing there in support of them, then we can deal with difficult challenges and expectations and whatever. When we don't feel Hashem, that's when it becomes all too much for us. We can't cope with it. And this is what David HaMelech himself says. He says, I'll keep all of your mitzvahs. I'll stand by you, Hashem. I'll have absolute faith in you, but on one condition. Al tazveni ad ma'od. Don't leave me alone. Don't forsake me. Stand next to me. Hold my hand. Make me feel like you're there. Make me feel okay with all these challenges. And that's what we will go up to today. And we will continue next week.
Thank you, Rifki.
Thank you, Rifki.
Thank you very much, Rifki.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
And you.
Bye.
Thanks, Rif.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.